Imagine for a second, you were digging through this really dusty, dimly lit historical archive.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
Right, and you stumble upon a fragile, like 2,500-year-old script.
Wow.
You carefully brush off the cover, and you're fully expecting to find some stuffy, high-minded tragedy, right? Like about kings and destiny and all that.
Sure, yeah, the classic Greek stuff.
Exactly. But instead, as you start translating it, you realize you've uncovered a slightly bawdy, laugh-out-loud Greek comedy.
Oh, comedy.
Yeah. And the main character, he's a one-eyed, violently flatulent, cannibalistic giant.
I mean, honestly, that sounds like the pitch for a bizarre late-night movie. Or, I don't know, maybe a fever dream someone had after eating way too much cheese.
It really does.
Yeah.
But the twist here is that this ancient grotesque comedy actually holds up a profound mirror to human nature.
Okay, how so?
Well, it's a mirror so crystal clear that when you look into it, it perfectly eliminates the beauty of the biblical gospel.
That is a massive pivot, but I am entirely here for it.
Right. So today we are doing a deep dive into Euripides' play, The Cyclops. It was written around the 5th century BCE.
Which is, if I remember correctly, the only surviving complete Greek satyr play in existence, right?
You got it. It's the only one. We have Coleridge's classic English translation of the play right in front of us, but we are pairing it with this absolutely fascinating source document.
Yeah, I was looking at that. It's really dense.
Super dense. It's a rigorous, in-depth theological paper titled 16.18 Cyclops Analysis.
Catchy title.
Very academic.
Yeah.
But this analysis takes this bizarre pagan comedy and reads it entirely through a conservative, canonical, biblical lens.
Which is just such a unique undertaking. I mean, the author of this analysis isn't just treating the play as, like, a museum piece or a historical artifact.
No, not at all.
They're placing Euripides and the biblical authors in this sort of cross-millennial dialogue. They're examining how this ancient myth intersects with foundational theological themes.
And that actually shapes the entire mission of our deep dive today.
Which is what, exactly?
We are going to extract the narrative of this play and filter it through that specific biblical lens to answer a really compelling question for you, our listener.
Okay, let's hear it.
How can understanding an ancient pagan comedy about a man-eating giant actually deepen your Christian faith, inspire a greater love for Christ, and challenge you to live more fully for Him in your daily life?
That is a high bar, but the source material definitely supports it.
We're going to unpack the humor. We're going to explore the visceral horror, because there is a lot of it, but we will continually pivot to the superior solutions offered by Scripture.
And I think the overarching theme we will see is how the biblical narrative completely outshines the temporary, cunning-based victories that are so celebrated in Greek mythology.
Yes, the cunning. The Greeks loved that.
They really did. But the analysis does a brilliant job of exposing the deep flaws of that pagan worldview, while simultaneously showing how the biblical worldview offers something infinitely more lasting.
So let's just set the stage and get right into the volcanic dirt of this story.
Literally volcanic.
Right. We are at the foot of Mount Etna in Sicily. It is a rugged, harsh, volcanic landscape.
Yeah.
And we're introduced to our first character, an old man named Silenus.
Poor Silenus.
Yeah, Silenus and his children, who are a chorus of satyrs, basically half man, half goat creatures. They've been shipwrecked and enslaved by Polyphemus.
And Polyphemus is, of course, the Cyclops.
Exactly, the big guy himself.
To really feel the weight of this opening, I mean, we have to understand who the satyrs are in Greek mythology.
Right, because they aren't just random goat guys.
No, they are fundamentally creatures of Dionysus, the god of wine, revelry, theater, and ecstasy.
They're party animal?
Literally party animals. Their entire existence is supposed to be dedicated to dancing, drinking, and chasing nymphs through the forest. That is their nature.
But here on Mount Etna, things are a little different.
Yeah, they have been utterly stripped of that identity. They are forced to be shepherds. They herd the Cyclops flocks, they sweep out his cave, and they basically just wait on him hand and foot.
It is a total existential crisis for a goat man. I mean, Silenus is literally out there with a rake, cleaning up the dirt, just complaining bitterly about his life.
I love his opening monologue.
It's so good. He gives this speech talking about how he used to sail the seas with the Bacchic god, how he fought glorious battles with his spear, and now his appointed task is to fill water troughs and serve this ungodly Cyclops at his impious feasts.
It is a massive, humiliating fall from grace.
Huge. But what's interesting is this humiliation is played entirely for laughs.
Yeah, and to understand why Euripides wrote it this way, we have to talk about the concept of the satyr play.
Right, because this isn't standard Greek tragedy.
Not at all. In ancient Greece, during the great dramatic festivals, like the city Dionysia, playwrights would submit a tragic trilogy.
3 plays.
Right. 3 heavy, serious, emotionally draining plays that wrestled with grief, war, the anger of the gods, all the heavy
It's
stuff.
just depressing, heavy drama all day.
Exactly. But the 4th drama performed, the closer, was always a satyr play. The Greeks called the genre patidia, which literally translates to play or tragedy at play.
I love that concept of tragedy at play. I kind of think of it like a cinematic post-credit scene in a massive superhero movie.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Or maybe a theatrical palate cleanser. You take these incredibly serious, larger-than-life mythological characters who just spent like 6 hours of stage time suffering, and you drop them into absurd, grotesque, even obscene situations.
The post-credits scene is a great modern analogy. It is a chorus-driven burlesque. It subverts the high-minded heroic epic with animalistic lowbrow comedy.
So the audience has just spent all day weeping over the fall of Troy or whatever, and now they get to watch half-goat men make crude jokes and fall all over themselves.
Right. But the brilliance of Euripides, and this is what the theological analysis hones in on, is that he uses this lighter, bodier angle to probe deeply serious ethical questions.
He kind of sneaks the philosophy in through the back door.
He really does. He takes the famous, terrifying story of the Cyclops from Homer's Odyssey, Book 9, and he injects these chaotic Dionysian satyrs into it to create a completely new dynamic.
Okay, so into this ridiculous, frustrating situation, a grumpy old man and his half-goat kids sweeping a cave for a giant arrives a ship.
Finally, some action.
It's Odysseus, the famous king of Ithaca, the legendary hero of the Trojan War. He's been blown off course by stormy winds, and he lands on the shores of Sicily with his weary crew.
And they're in bad shape.
Yeah, they have water skins, but they are completely empty. They're desperate for a river, and they're desperate for food.
This arrival immediately sets up a massive thematic collision in the play.
The culture clash.
Exactly, the stark contrast between civilization and barbarism. When Odysseus approaches Silenus and asks about the land, Silenus paints a bleak, terrifying picture.
He does not sugarcoat it.
No, he warns Odysseus that the Cyclops doesn't sow grain. There is no agriculture, there are no city walls, no laws, no assemblies, no democracy. The Cyclops are solitary rovers.
Which, to a Greek, that's basically admitting you're an animal.
Right. And furthermore, they don't drink wine, which to the 5th century Greeks was the ultimate hallmark of a civilized, cultivated society.
And most terrifyingly, Silenus just drops the hammer. The Cyclops slaughters and eats all strangers.
Yeah, that's a problem.
He literally says, no one has ever arrived here without being butchered. The Cyclops is painted as the absolute zenith of barbarism.
The ultimate savage.
But, reading the analysis, I find myself questioning this entire framework.
How so?
Well, it's incredibly easy to look at the Cyclops as the ultimate savage here, and the Greeks, with their wine and ships and laws, as the civilized ones.
Right, the good guys.
But doesn't the biblical worldview fundamentally challenge this strict civilized versus savage binary?
It dismantles it entirely, and this is really where the theological analysis begins to bear fruit.
Because the Greeks loved that binary.
Oh, they thrived on it. The play uses this Greek versus Cyclops dynamic to establish a very clear dualism. It's the light of Greek order versus the darkness of monstrous chaos.
The Greek mind basically saw Hellenic culture, their laws, their art, their symposiums, as the absolute pinnacle of human achievement.
Right. Exactly. Everyone else, especially monsters who don't drink wine or live in cities, was a barbarian.
Right. But the New Testament universalizes the human condition. It flattens that whole hierarchy.
It really does. The theological analysis points to the letters of Paul to make this incredibly clear.
Like in Romans.
Yes, Romans is a perfect example. Whether you are the civilized Greek philosopher in Athens or the savage, uncultured Gentile living on the fringes of the empire, you are equally fallen.
You're in the same boat.
You are equally driven by sinful appetites, and you are equally in need of salvation. True civilization, in the biblical sense, isn't about having impenetrable city walls or early democratic voting systems or really refined vineyards.
So if it's not about societal infrastructure or drinking good wine, how does the Bible actually define a truly civilized state?
Well, the analysis connects this directly to the early chapters of Acts, specifically Acts chapter 2.
The early church.
Right. The true civilized state in Scripture is marked by radical hospitality, the voluntary sharing of resources, and deep spiritual community.
Wow, that's a big shift from the Greek idea.
It's a total paradigm shift. It is a community governed not by social convention or human philosophy, but by the indwelling of the Holy Spirit.
So the biblical perspective looks at both the cunning Odysseus and the brutal Cyclops and says, fundamentally, you are both missing the mark of what humanity was created to be.
Exactly. You're just expressing your brokenness in different ways.
One is just wearing a nicer toga.
It's
That tension brings us perfectly to the next sequence of events, which is hilarious, but also deeply revealing about human nature. Let's call this the art of the deal.
Oh, the scene is so good.
Because what happens next on the beach is an absolute masterclass in manipulation.
It really is.
Odysseus needs food desperately, and Silenus is like, look, we only have meat, cheese, and milk. You can offer me all the gold from Troy, but it won't help you here.
He has no use for money on a volcano.
Right. So Odysseus pulls out his trump card. He reveals he has a skin of incredibly potent magical wine.
And this is not just an old vintage from Ithaca. This is Maronian wine.
Maronian wine. What makes that so special?
It was a gift given to Odysseus by Maron, who, in mythology, is a son of the Bacchic god himself. It is quite literally divine alcohol.
Okay, so Odysseus unseals the skin and pours just a tiny bit into a cup.
Just a taste.
Not even a taste. Silenus, the deprived follower of the wine god, just loses his mind. He doesn't even drink it yet. He just catches the scent on the wind and yells, "Ye gods!" What a delicious scent it has.
He is so dramatic.
Odysseus lets him take one drink, and Silenus screams, "Zones! Bacchus is inviting me to dance." He gets instantly, hilariously intoxicated.
One sip.
One sip. And his desperation for this wine is so complete that he is willing to trade absolutely everything his monstrous master owns.
He's selling out the boss.
Instantly. He hands over the Cyclops' prized cheese and his fattest lambs, and he tells Odysseus he would literally throw himself off the Leucadian rock into the sea just to secure one cup of this stuff.
He flat out says that if a man doesn't rejoice in drinking, he is a madman.
Which is rich coming from a goat man on a volcano.
It is a moment of pure, unrestrained physical appetite, completely overriding any sense of duty, logic, or self-preservation.
But Euripides' comedic timing is impeccable here. Because right as the lambs are being handed over, the ground shakes.
Oh.
The Cyclops returns from hunting.
And the tone shifts from a frat party to a horror movie in a split second.
The giant is furious. He walks up to his cave, sees his precious lambs tied up with willow bands, and sees his cheese presses scattered everywhere.
He knows something is up.
He demands to know what is happening. And Silenus, to save his own skin, immediately throws all his newfound friends under the bus.
Just zero loyalty.
Zero. He lies through his teeth. He physically beats his own head and chest to make it look like he's been battered, and he claims to the Cyclops that Odysseus brutally attacked him and tried to steal the goods by force.
The sheer audacity of Silenus in this scene is striking. I mean, Odysseus, who thought they had a solid trade agreement, calls him out on the lie immediately.
And Silenus just doubles down with the most elaborate, ridiculous string of oaths you can imagine.
He really goes for it.
The Coleridge translation captures the absurdity of this so well. Silenus, looking at this giant monster, swears by the Cyclops' sire Poseidon, by the sea god Triton, by Calypso, by the sacred billows of the ocean.
Keep going. It gets better.
And this is my absolute favorite, by all the race of fish. He looks the Cyclops in the eye and says, "I swear to thee, most noble sir, dear little Cyclops, mastermind, it is not I who sell thy goods to strangers."
Dear little Cyclops.
Dear little Cyclops. He is laying it on so thick, it's a wonder the giant doesn't choke on it.
Well, it's funny. The theological analysis highlights a core theme that Euripides is exploring here, which is the immense power and the ultimate breakdown of truth and language.
Language as a weapon.
Exactly. In 5th century Athens, when Euripides was writing, the city was obsessed with what they called sophistry.
How exactly did sophistry work in that culture? What made it such a dominant force?
Well, Athens was a radical democracy, meaning if you were accused of a crime or involved in a property dispute, there were no professional lawyers to represent you.
You had to defend yourself.
You had to stand up in front of a jury of hundreds of your peers and argue your own case. Because of this, a class of traveling teachers emerged called the sophists.
And they taught people how to speak?
They charged high fees to teach wealthy young men the art of rhetoric, how to argue persuasively, how to twist words, and how to win an argument regardless of whether you were actually right or wrong.
So truth didn't really matter.
Not to them. Sophistry was the art of clever, persuasive, but often fallacious argumentation. It was about using language not to reveal the truth, but to secure power or survival.
So language becomes completely detached from reality. It's just a tool to get what you want.
Precisely.
You see that perfectly in this scene.
Yeah.
Everyone is manipulating language to survive. Silenus tells a blatant, bald-faced lie to protect himself from being eaten.
And Odysseus uses smooth, lawyer-like rhetoric to try and negotiate his way out of a slaughter.
And Euripides' play, reflecting the broader Greek culture, actually tends to celebrate this sophistic trickery, doesn't it?
It does. The Greeks highly valued a concept called metis,
Metis.
which translates to human cunning, craftiness, or street smarts. Odysseus is the ultimate literary avatar of metis.
The guy is basically the ancient Greek Batman. He always has a plan.
Right, and his rhetoric is celebrated because it often succeeds. But the biblical analysis offers a very sharp critique of this entire framework.
Because the biblical concern is heavily weighted toward truthful speech, regardless of the immediate consequences.
Yes. The analysis references Ephesians 4.25, where Paul commands believers, "Therefore, having put away falsehood, let each one of you speak the truth with his neighbor."
The analysis pushes us to look at the underlying mechanics of why truth matters so much in the biblical worldview.
And this brings up a profound faith application for you, the listener.
We have to ask ourselves, how often do you rely on your own cleverness, your own carefully crafted spin, or your own rhetorical manipulation to navigate your way out of trouble at work?
Or to win an argument in your marriage.
Exactly. We justify it because it works.
It gets results.
But the biblical critique is that this kind of self-serving deception, no matter how clever or successful it seems in the short term, is fundamentally aligned with the father of lies.
Which is how Jesus describes Satan in John 8.44.
That is a harsh reality check. Culturally, we love the clever hero.
We love a good heist movie, right? We love the guy who finds the loophole and outsmarts the system or the monster.
But the Bible is saying that if you are using deception as your primary tool for navigating the world, you are operating in the dark.
Because the Bible offers a superior solution regarding truth. Look at the prologue to the Gospel of John. Christ is revealed as the divine Logos.
The Word made flesh.
Yes, the ultimate truth. In the Christian worldview, truth is not a manipulative tool or a rhetorical strategy. Truth is a person.
So true freedom doesn't come from hiding behind cleverness, spin, or metis.
It comes from walking in the light of the Logos.
So after Silenus spins his ridiculous web of lies, we move into the next phase of the play, which is a classic feature of Greek drama called the agon.
The formal debate.
Right. Odysseus steps forward and makes a passionate, highly structured plea to the Cyclops for xenia. Now, xenia is the ancient Greek concept of guest friendship or hospitality, and it was deeply ingrained in their culture.
To understand xenia, we have to realize that traveling in the ancient world was incredibly dangerous.
There were no Holiday Inns.
No hotels, no embassies, no cell phones. If you washed up on a foreign shore, your life depended entirely on the hospitality of the locals.
It was life or death.
Absolutely. The Greeks believed that xenia was protected by Zeus himself. You are obligated to take in a stranger, feed them, give them a gift, and protect them, because you might find yourself shipwrecked one day, needing that exact same protection.
It was an insurance policy.
Basically, yes.
Odysseus leans hard into this cultural expectation. He appeals to the gods, to custom, to shared Hellenic values.
He gives a great speech.
He reminds the Cyclops that the Greek armies actually protected the temples of his father, Poseidon, during the Trojan War. He begs the giant to respect the sacred custom of receiving shipwrecked suppliants.
Arguing that it is a fundamental law of mortal men to give them clothes and help.
Right, not to impale them on spits for a fire-roasted meal.
And this is where Euripides does something absolutely brilliant with the character of Polyphemus.
He flips the script.
He really does. He doesn't just make the Cyclops a grunting, mindless brute, which is how he's portrayed in Homer's original Odyssey. Euripides updates the monster.
He gives him an upgrade.
He turns the Cyclops into a 5th century intellectual. He transforms him into a sophisticated, cynical philosopher who actively and articulately denies the gods.
It is a genuinely chilling monologue. Polyphemus listens to Odysseus give this grand, noble speech about piety and justice and the gods, and the Cyclops basically just laughs in his face.
He's entirely unimpressed.
He gives a speech of his own, declaring that wealth, my mannequin, is the god for the wise. All else is mere vaunting and fine words.
He calls him my mannequin, like a little doll.
He says he doesn't shudder at Zeus's thunderbolts. Why should he? When it rains, he doesn't pray for it to stop. He just goes deep into his snug cave, roasts a calf, drinks a massive vat of milk, and rivals the thunder of Zeus by passing gas.
It is incredibly crass.
So crass.
But the philosophical point behind the crassness is terrifying. The Cyclops says, I sacrifice to no one save myself and this belly, the greatest of deities.
His belly is a god.
And he explicitly says that lawgivers, the people who try to bring order, morality, and justice to human life, can go hang.
When you really look at what he is saying, when you really examine his argument, he is claiming that his comfort, his accumulated wealth, and his physical appetites are the only realities that exist.
They're the only things that matter to him.
If we map that onto today, that is essentially the creed of modern extreme individualism, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
It is hyper-consumerism pushed to its logical extreme.
Yeah.
The Cyclops philosophy isn't just an ancient myth. It is the default, unstated worldview of much of the modern world.
That is a very astute connection, and the theological source spends a lot of time unpacking this.
It dives deep here.
The Archelaus connects this moment in the play to two massive foundational biblical themes that are crucial for understanding how the gospel challenges our culture.
Okay, let's look at the first one.
First, let's look at the concept of hospitality. As we discussed, the Greeks viewed xenia as a social convention, a mutual protection pact born out of necessity. But the Old Testament commands hospitality as something far deeper and more profound.
The analysis points specifically to Leviticus 19 and Deuteronomy 10 regarding the treatment of the alien and the stranger.
Right. Yes. In the Old Testament, welcoming the stranger isn't just a polite social custom. It is a direct act of covenant obedience, and it is a reflection of the imago Dei,
The image of God.
the belief that every human being bears the image of God. The Israelites are commanded to welcome the stranger because God welcomed and rescued them when they were aliens and slaves in Egypt.
So you show mercy because you have received mercy.
Exactly. Furthermore, you welcome the stranger because they bear the imprint of the Creator. Think of the famous scene with Abraham in Genesis 18.
When the angels visit him.
Right. He is sitting by the oaks of Mamre, and when he sees three strangers approaching, he doesn't just tolerate them. He eagerly runs out to meet them, bows down, and prepares a massive feast. That is the biblical ideal of radical hospitality.
And the stark contrast to Abraham's hospitality is the city of Sodom in Genesis 19.
Which violently violates and attempts to consume the stranger, much like the Cyclops.
That's a powerful parallel.
It is precisely the connection the analysis makes. The Cyclops' brutal inhospitality is just a symptom of his deeper underlying rebellion against God.
Which brings us to the second biblical theme, the idolatry of the appetite.
This one hits close to home.
The Cyclops literally names his belly as his god. This is not just Euripides writing a funny line. It directly anticipates the exact theological critique the Apostle Paul makes centuries later in the New Testament.
Word for word, almost.
In Philippians 3.1 time, Paul warns the church with tears about those whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and they glory in their shame with minds set on earthly things.
He echoes this in Romans 16.1, warning against those who serve their own appetites rather than Christ.
So, bringing this back to our mission for this deep dive, what does this mean for you, the listener, right now? The text forces us to ask some uncomfortable questions.
Very uncomfortable.
When we prioritize our own self-interest, our continuous consumption, our physical comfort, and our appetites over obeying God's law and loving our neighbor, aren't we just adopting the worldview of the Cyclops?
We are making our belly our God.
We really are.
It is a sobering reflection. We might not be roasting shipwrecked sailors in a cave, but the internal spiritual posture of radical autonomy and self-deification is identical.
We are saying that our desires are the highest authority in our lives.
And speaking of roasting sailors, the intellectual debate ends abruptly here, and the horrifying reality of the Cyclops' barbarism is unleashed.
It gets dark fast.
Polyphemus doesn't care about Odysseus' arguments about the gods or justice. He drives the weeping men into the dark cave.
A little while later, Odysseus manages to slip out while the giant is sleeping, and he describes to the chorus of satyrs exactly what he witnessed inside. It is incredibly visceral.
Euripides shifts the tone here drastically. He wants the audience to feel the horror of what happens when a creature with the philosophy of the Cyclops actually possesses the physical power to enact it.
Odysseus describes the scene. He says the Cyclops lit a massive fire of oak logs. Then he grabbed two of the fattest Greek sailors, hoisted them up, and dashed their brains out against the sharp, rocky floor of the cave.
Brutal.
He hacked up their fleshy parts with a heavy cleaver to grill on the hot coals, and threw their remaining limbs into a massive cauldron to boil.
Odysseus says the surviving men were cowering in the corners like frightened birds.
The blood literally from soaking their skin. And Odysseus was forced to step forward and serve cups of milk to this hell cook.
It is crucial to look at the broader ancient literary context here, which the source document does with rigorous detail.
What do the scholars say about this?
When analyzing ancient texts like this, scholars often look for ancient Near Eastern, or ANE, parallels.
Okay.
They want to know, is this story of a one-eyed giant entirely unique to the Greeks? Or is it drawing on an older shared mythology from surrounding cultures like the Canaanites or the Babylonians?
And what did they find?
The analysis notes that while there is no firm, direct literary dependence, you won't find a one-eyed cannibal giant explicitly named in surviving A&E texts like the Epic of Gilgamesh. There is a massive, shared, typological giant monster motif across all these rival cultures.
So why do scholars care about that? What does a shared giant monster motif tell us about the ancient world?
It tells us that across the ancient Mediterranean and Near East, the giant was universally understood as the ultimate avatar of chaos, hubris, and anti-civilization.
A symbol of pure pride.
The giant is the physical embodiment of pride opposing divine order, and we see this heavily in the biblical narrative.
Polyphemus' arrogant boast that he fears no gods, that deeply echoes the hubris of the builders of the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, doesn't it?
Yes, who wanted to build a tower to the heavens to make a name for themselves.
And it echoes the rebellious giants known as the Nephilim or Rephaim in Genesis 6 and Numbers 13, who terrified the Israelites.
And most obviously, it echoes the defiant taunts of the giant Goliath in 1 Samuel 17, who stood in the valley and mocked the armies of the living God.
Which brings up a critical point that I think we really need to untangle here.
Go for it.
Odysseus eventually defeats his giant, right? But he does it with a clever trick involving wine and a sharpened stick. How does that differ from how giants are defeated in the Bible?
That's a really important question.
Because looking at the Goliath story, David used a sling. He used a weapon of distance to hit a slow-moving target. Isn't that just a tactical trick, much like Odysseus' strategy?
Clarifying the mechanism of those victories is exactly where the biblical worldview radically diverges from the Greek worldview.
Okay, unpack that for us.
The theological analysis points out that in the Old Testament, giants fall not by human cunning, metis, or tactical brilliance, but exclusively by Yahweh's sovereign power.
And that power is accessed through human faith.
Exactly. Look closely at the text of 1 Samuel 17. David doesn't defeat Goliath because he is a craftier strategist or because he found a clever loophole.
He wasn't just being sneaky.
No. Before he ever swings the sling, David explicitly tells Goliath, "You come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts." He says the battle is the Lord's and he will give you into our hand.
The victory is credited entirely to God's power, not David's trickery.
That is a profound distinction. So when we face giants in our own lives, whether those are massive systemic injustices, deeply rooted personal sins, or overwhelming life obstacles, the cultural instinct, the pagan instinct, is to rely on our own midas.
We think we just need to hustle harder, find a better strategy, or outsmart the problem.
But the biblical mandate is to acknowledge our weakness and rely entirely on God's power. It is an invitation to trust that God is the one who brings down the proud.
The overarching contrast is clear. The Greek narrative gives you a self-reliant hero who saves himself through his own brilliance.
And the biblical narrative gives you a savior who rescues you when you are fundamentally powerless to save yourself.
So let's examine that Greek brilliance in action. We are moving into the most famous part of the Odysseus legend.
The nobody trick.
The nobody trick, the deception, and a truly mind-bending connection to the New Testament.
This is where the analysis really shines.
Inside the cave, after the gruesome feast is over, Odysseus puts his plan into motion. He approaches the Cyclops and offers him a cup of that divine, uncut Maronian wine.
The Cyclops drains it, loves it, and demands more.
Odysseus just keeps filling his cup, getting the giant incredibly violently drunk.
And in his drunken euphoric stupor, the Cyclops asks Odysseus his name, promising that if he tells him, he will give him a gift in return for the excellent wine.
A twisted gift.
Yeah.
Because the gift is that he promises to eat him last.
How generous.
Odysseus, knowing exactly what he is doing, gives his legendary answer. He says, "No man," or in many translations, "nobody. My name is nobody."
The Cyclops accepts this, gets completely fuddled, even tries to drag old Silenus into the cave as his Ganymede for some drunken revelry.
Only passes out cold on the floor.
Now, this specific sequence of events, the hero's arrival by boat, the encounter with a chaotic monster dwelling in the rocks, the pointed asking of a name, and the specific nature of the answer.
It sets up an incredible parallel.
It leads the theological analysis to uncover a fascinating typological echo in the New Testament. The author walks us through scholarly noted parallels between this pagan story of the Cyclops and the biblical account of the Gerasene demoniac.
Which is found in Mark chapter 5 and Luke chapter 8. I read this part of the analysis 3 times because the connections are stunning. Let's break down the parallels for the listener so they can see the shape of this.
When scholars talk about a typological echo, they aren't necessarily saying that Mark and Luke sat down with a copy of Euripides and copied his homework.
Right, it's not plagiarism.
They're saying that there was a shared cultural shape to stories about confronting chaos. In both stories, you have a savior figure arriving by boat to a foreign, untamed shore. You have a chaotic, violent, untamable figure dwelling in rocky tombs or caves, the Cyclops in his cavern, the demon-possessed man living among the tombs.
Check. And in both stories, you have a specific, pointed inquiry about identity. What is your name?
And the answers. I was trying to figure out how they connect because on the surface they seem like opposites.
Right. Odysseus says his name is nobody. It's a zero, a void, a complete absence of identity.
But when Jesus asks the demoniac his name, the answer is legion, for we are many. It is a multitude, an overwhelming, chaotic crowd.
But they are actually functioning the same way, aren't they? They both play on the exact same motif of obscured, hidden, or non-human identity.
That's exactly right. They both represent an anti-identity that defies normal human interaction, and the structural parallels continue.
Both stories feature a blinding or a dramatic expulsion of the chaotic force, and both narratives end with a specific command or an action involving telling others what just happened.
The literary shape is undeniably similar.
But the analysis argues that the gospel writers aren't just using this shape for dramatic effect. If they are aware of this cultural trope, this story shape that everyone in the ancient Mediterranean world knew, they are using it to communicate a very specific theological point.
So what are they trying to say by mirroring it so closely?
They are establishing a superior solution. The theological source dives deeply into the Greek grammar of the New Testament passages here to prove this point, and it is fascinating.
It really gets into the weeds of the language.
The author contrasts the imperfective verb tenses used to describe the ongoing chaos of the demoniac with the aorist, or perfective verbs used to describe the arrival of Christ.
Let's slow down and explain that, because Greek verb tenses can be tricky. What is the practical difference between imperfective and perfective in this context?
Think of it like drawing. An imperfective verb is like drawing a long, continuous line. It describes an action that is ongoing, continuous, or repeated in the past.
The gospel writers use imperfective verbs to describe the demoniac.
Right. He was always crying out. He was continually cutting himself. People kept trying to bind him, and he kept tearing the chains apart. It paints a picture of a world locked in an endless cycle of unbreakable chaos.
But the aorist, or perfective tense, is like drawing a single, decisive dot.
Yes. It describes a completed holistic action. When Christ arrives, the verbs shift to the aorist. He stepped out of the boat, he commanded the Spirit.
The chaos was an ongoing line, but Christ's arrival is a decisive dot that permanently shatters the line of chaos.
That is a beautiful way to explain it. It highlights the vast difference in the nature of the victory.
Because Odysseus has to use a wine trick. He has to get the monster drunk, lie about his name, and use physical violence just to temporarily sneak out the back door.
He doesn't cure the Cyclops, he just escapes him. The giant is still there, still monstrous.
But Jesus steps off a boat into the region of the Gerasenes and uses his authoritative word.
He doesn't need to trick the demons with a clever loophole.
He doesn't negotiate a treaty with them. He simply commands them. And the result isn't a temporary escape for the townspeople. It is permanent, holistic restoration for the man.
The townspeople come out and find the man sitting at Jesus' feet, clothed and in his right mind.
Think about how that applies to your faith. Christ doesn't trick the demons in your life. He commands them.
The Christian faith is anchored in a Savior who possesses absolute, unquestioned authority over the chaotic forces of this world.
You don't need to learn a magic trick, a self-help hack, or the right combination of words to find freedom. You need to submit to the Word himself.
It is the ultimate difference between relying on human survival tactics and experiencing divine redemption.
Which brings us to the climax of the physical action in Euripides' play. The blinding, the false joy of wine, and the escape.
The Cyclops is passed out drunk, vomiting meat and wine onto the floor of the cave.
Disgusting.
Odysseus rallies the chorus of satyrs. He tells them it's time to act, to help him blind the giant. And Euripides injects so much brilliant comedy into this incredibly tense moment.
Because the satyrs had talked a huge game earlier about wanting to crush the Cyclops.
But when it is actually time to pick up a weapon, they make the most pathetic, hilarious excuses.
One of the satyrs suddenly clutches his leg and claims, "I have just gone lame."
Another says, "I sprained my ankle, standing still."
A third claims he's suddenly got dust or ashes in his eyes and can't see a thing. They are absolute cowards, completely unwilling to risk themselves.
I sprained my ankle standing still. It is so relatable. It's the ancient equivalent of saying, "Oh, I'd love to help you move your couch, but I just remembered I have to wash my hair."
Pretty much.
So abandoned by the chorus, Odysseus and his own small crew have to do the job alone. They take a massive olive branch they had sharpened earlier. They heat the point in the fire until it is glowing red hot.
And then they drive it directly into the Cyclops' single eye, spinning it like a shipwright spinning a drill.
The Cyclops wakes up screaming in unimaginable agony. And the nobody trick pays off perfectly.
He yells to the satyrs outside the cave, "No man is blinding me, no man is destroying me."
And the satyrs, thinking he is saying no man is hurting him, just mock him. Then there is no one hurting thee after all, they say. Then art thou not blind?
It is a brilliant pun-based escape that relies entirely on linguistic manipulation. But if we pull back and look at the underlying themes, the analysis points out, we see a profound commentary on joy and blindness.
How's the wine tie into that?
Throughout the play, we see the intoxicating, chaotic joy of Dionysian wine. It is what the satyrs long for, it is what Silenus trades everything for, and it is what ultimately brings the mighty Cyclops down.
The pagan world sought transcendence, joy, and escape from suffering through excess and intoxication.
And the Bible actually acknowledges that deeply human search for joy and transcendence, but it offers a profound critique of the false ecstasy of physical excess.
The theological analysis points us directly to Ephesians 5:18, where Paul writes, "Do not get drunk with wine, for that is debauchery, but be filled with the Spirit."
The contrast Paul is drawing is deliberate. The biblical worldview understands that humanity has an internal void that we constantly try to fill with substances, with fleeting pleasures, with our physical appetites.
Or bellies, as the Cyclops called it.
But Christ offers the true joy and permanent fulfillment that paganism unsuccessfully seeks at the bottom of a bottle. Think of Jesus' very first public miracle at the wedding in Cana, recorded in John 2.
He turns water into wine.
An abundance of the finest wine. It is a sign pointing to the abundant, joyful, true life that he brings, which infinitely surpasses any earthly intoxication or temporary thrill.
And then there is the physical act of the blinding itself. Polyphemus suffers literal physical blindness as a result of the attack.
But as the analysis points out, he was already spiritually and philosophically blind long before Odysseus arrived, wasn't he?
He rejected the truth of the gods, he defied the laws of hospitality, and he worshipped his own belly.
His physical blindness is just an outward manifestation of his internal state.
That is a crucial insight. And it perfectly mirrors a major New Testament theme regarding spiritual blindness, particularly in the Gospel of John.
Look at the narrative in John 9, the story of the man born blind. Jesus heals the man's physical sight, but the religious leaders, the Pharisees, refuse to see the truth of who Jesus is, despite the evidence right in front of them.
Jesus concludes that interaction by saying that he came into the world so that the blind will see and those who claim to see will become blind.
The Pharisees possessed vast theological knowledge. They claimed to have perfect sight, yet they were entirely spiritually blind to the word standing in front of them.
The theological source also references 2 Corinthians 4:4, which states that the God of this age has blinded the minds of unbelievers so that they cannot see the light of the gospel that displays the glory of Christ.
And how does this inspire us or challenge our daily walk?
It reminds us that without the intervening grace of Christ, our default human state is spiritual blindness.
We are very much like the Cyclops, confident in our own power, trusting our own appetites, yet sitting in the dark, unable to perceive true reality.
Jesus declares himself to be the light of the world. We must continually pray for spiritual sight, recognizing that true vision, a true understanding of reality, justice, and love, comes only as a gift from him.
Not from our own native intellect or our own philosophical perspective.
We can't think our way into the light. We have to be given sight. That is incredibly humbling. Which leads us to the final act of the play and the ultimate theological contrast.
The escape.
The play wraps up with Odysseus and his men executing their final trick. They tie themselves under the bellies of the Cyclops' massive sheep. As the blind giant feels the tops of the sheep passing out of the cave, he misses the men hidden underneath.
And they slip out to freedom.
Once they are safely on their ship and rowing away, Odysseus' famous hubris flares up. He can't help himself. He needs the monster to know who beat him.
He taunts the Cyclops from the water and reveals his true identity. Odysseus, the name my father gave me.
And that arrogant revelation comes with a severe cost. Hearing the name, the Cyclops realizes that an ancient prophecy has been fulfilled. Enraged, he rips off massive boulders from the mountain and hurls them blindly at the sound of Odysseus' voice.
Narrowly missing the ship, but churning up the sea.
And as the ship sails away, the Cyclops curses Odysseus, praying to his father Poseidon that Odysseus will suffer terribly at sea for many days.
A curse that, if you know the broader mythology of the Odyssey, absolutely comes true, costing Odysseus years of his life and the lives of all his remaining men.
So if we synthesize this canonical conclusion, Odysseus wins the immediate battle. He outsmarts the monster. But it is an incredibly messy, localized, and costly victory.
He leaves a trail of cyclical violence and revenge behind him.
He saves his own life in the moment, sure,
Yeah.
but he loses men in the cave, he earns a divine curse that will plague his journey, and he achieved this entire victory relying purely on deceit, manipulation, and violence.
And this is exactly where the biblical critique of the pagan worldview reaches its absolute peak in the analysis.
Pagan literature, like Euripides Cyclops, is undeniably brilliant.
It brilliantly and humorously exposes the human condition. It holds up a mirror and shows us our gluttony, our hubris, our tendency toward moral relativism, and our desperate, clawing reliance on our own cunning to survive.
It diagnoses the disease perfectly, but the remedy it offers is completely bankrupt.
Because the absolute best that human cunning can do is buy you a little bit of time.
It can get you out of the immediate danger of the cave, but it cannot lift the curse. You cannot change the monster, and it cannot change your own flawed nature.
Building on that, this is the ultimate contrast the theological analysis leaves us with. It points us to Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 through 11, which is arguably one of the most beautiful and profound passages in all of Scripture.
How does Christ deal with the chaotic giants of sin, death, and evil?
He does not defeat evil through deception. He doesn't use a rhetorical trick or a clever loophole. He doesn't prioritize his own self-preservation or rely on violence.
He defeats the ultimate enemies of humanity through cruciform humility.
The passage says, he emptied himself, taking the form of a servant. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross.
Yes, Christ absorbed the violence and the curse of the world.
And because of that unyielding, sacrificial humility, God highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name.
Christ achieves an eternal cosmic exaltation that brings true forgiveness, gives sight to the spiritually blind, and pours out the Spirit's permanent joy.
Christ's victory completely breaks the pagan cycle of revenge and shatters the curse of sin.
So if we want to answer our core mission today, how to live more fully for Christ in light of this text, it means we are constantly forced to choose between these two distinct playbooks for navigating life.
We have to actively abandon the Odysseus playbook.
That is the playbook of self-reliant cunning, of spinning the truth to protect ourselves, of making our bellies our God, and endlessly trying to outsmart our problems.
Instead, we are challenged to adopt the Christ playbook.
That is the playbook of radical humility, of unwavering truth-telling, of self-sacrifice, and of resting in the faith that God, the true sovereign over all chaos, will exalt you and protect you in his perfect timing.
It requires a fundamental shift in the human heart, from Marius, our own cunning, to faith.
The analysis beautifully demonstrates that Scripture alone provides the genuine gospel remedy to the human condition that the brilliant Greek playwrights so clearly saw, but were ultimately powerless to cure.
We've traveled a long way in this deep dive.
From the comedic, terrifying volcanic caves of Mount Etna to the foot of the cross.
We've seen how Euripides' brilliant satyr play perfectly captures the deepest flaws of humanity. Our tendency to worship our appetites, to trust our own cleverness, and to manipulate the truth for survival.
And we have seen how the Bible offers the ultimate superior remedy in the person and the humility of Jesus Christ.
It is a powerful reminder that all truth is God's truth, and even a 2,500-year-old pagan comedy about a drunken giant can ultimately point us to our desperate need for a savior.
I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you go about your day. The play ends with Odysseus sailing away, leaving the blinded, raging Cyclops behind in the dark cave.
It's an escape, but it is not a cure.
The monster is still there, still violent, still broken, Think about the Cyclops in your own life right now.
The giant looming sins, the chaotic situations, the prideful
Are
obstacles.
you just trying to poke them in the eye with a clever trick so you can run away and survive for another day?
Or are you willing to stop relying on your own cunning and bring those chaotic giants to the true light of the world?
He's the only one who doesn't just offer a temporary escape route, but complete, holistic, and eternal transformation. Keep seeking that light.